Awesome. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session, which is Understanding Dyslexia and Supporting Your Child from Home. This presentation was put together in partnership with Falls Church City Public Schools and our George Mason University Training and Technical Assistance Center. We are really excited to host this session for our community, and we hope that at the end, we would have provided you with all the relevant information to support your child from home. And with that, we'll go ahead and begin with some introductions. So hi, if you have never met me before, or maybe I've seen you in our school buildings, my name is Ann Belletto. I'm the Pre-K-12 Literacy Coordinator for Falls Church City Public School. I work under the Curriculum, Instruction, and Achievement team in our division. I am also our division's Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, which is also known as LETRS. So I am a trainer for that. And I'm also our division's dyslexia advisor. At the state level, I'm also the president of the Virginia State Literacy Association for the organization under the Gifted Committee. And I also work alongside many of our Region 4 literacy supervisors and coordinators. And with me today, I also have, again, our George Mason partners who I will eventually transfer over, and they will go ahead and introduce themselves to you.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us. My name is April Lennox, and I work for the Training and Technical Assistance Center, TTAC, at George Mason University. My colleague, Patricia Morgan, and I are going to be presenting on how understanding and supporting students with dyslexia. You may notice Dr. Morgan is not on the line right now, so her section has been pre-recorded, and we will play it after my section. But we're excited to spend the next 60 minutes with you to give an overview of dyslexia and how you can support your child from the perspective of transitioning between the different stages within pre-K to 12th grade and post-secondary options. On our next couple of slides, we just wanted to give you a quick overview of George Mason TTAC. So if you type it in the URL, you will see that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we have 8 superintendent regions. Each region has a TTAC, and we support Region 4. Our support comes in many forms, but primarily we customize professional learning that meets school division goals and needs. And we also support building teacher capacity around evidence-based practices. And we provide this support to improve outcomes for students with disabilities. And I'm going to ask Ann to click through the next 2 slides, just so you can see that those are our principal investigators, and it shares our mission and scope of work. And then in our next slide, you can see our focus areas, our 8 focus areas for TTAC, and each section is interactive if you want to learn a little more. And in the slide after, it's just ways to stay connected with some information that we share out regularly through our different digital platforms.
All right, thank you, April. So to let you all know what our learning objectives are for this session, you are going to learn about the definition of dyslexia. You'll also hear from April about the different myths and signs of dyslexia. And then Dr. Morgan's section is more about transitioning and planning for life after high school. And then I will get into Falls Church Public School and the process that we go through when your child or any students have concerns with literacy and some of the homeschool connections. And then in all sections of our presentation, we have resources and tools to help support you and your child from home. And in the event that we go a little bit over time, what we did is we went ahead and added on a Q&A form. Actually, April, are you able to put that into
Yep, I will drop that in the
you.
chat for you.
Great. So if you click on this form, all we ask is for your name. Please put in your email address so that we know who to respond to and how to respond back to your questions. If you have any of your child in any of these schools, please click on the school that your child is in. Sorry, I'm doing letting people in at the same time. So excuse me for a little bit. And then you can type in your questions here. And then if you'd like to provide any other feedback for our presentation, for example, if you'd like more information for next steps, we are more than happy to acknowledge that as well. And maybe we can do another presentation after this session. Any questions about the form? Okay, great. And let us know if you're unable to open it, but it should work. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it back to April. Let me just get back to the slide. And there you go.
All right. Thank you, Anne. So again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I'm excited to share this information with you. As a parent of a child with dyslexia and an aunt of a child with dyslexia and a granddaughter of a person with dyslexia, the journey of understanding dyslexia and how to support my loved ones is very personal to me. Children with dyslexia will be adults with dyslexia. People with dyslexia have so many wonderful gifts and talents to offer the world. However, I know when you're in the trenches with school age children, you don't always readily see it in the conventional school setting. So in our time together, you will hear me talk about dyslexia. However, I did embed several videos so you have the opportunity to hear the information from different sources. And we'll move on to one of a great resource. That's next. As a resident of the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're so fortunate to have the Virginia Literacy Act, affectionately known as the VLA. And it's going to go into full effect in this upcoming school year. The VLA is designed to support all learners in the area of literacy with science-based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction. The VLA will positively impact core instruction in all tiers of intervention. All components of the VLA will support students with a formal diagnosis of dyslexia and even those who present with some of the characteristics. My goal today is to share an overview of dyslexia and how we as parents and loved ones of those with dyslexia can support them and celebrate their strengths outside of the classroom. So in our next slide, we're going to talk about well, first, I want to set the stage and activate our background with what we'll be learning with this quick video. Front-loading information is typical for introducing vocabulary to start explicit and direct instruction for our students, and I wanted to model it in this session.
Did you want me to play the video, April? Sorry.
Oh, yes, if you can play it real quick.
Sure.
Students with dyslexia may find it hard to learn how letters link to sounds, sh, how to blend sounds together into words,
I thought you were doing something inside.
ship,
I'm sure people just
and break words into individual sounds, like b, l, a.
And if everyone could take a moment to
How to
mute
read
if
and spell
possible.
new words, g, o, grow. Every person with dyslexia is unique and has different learning needs. Some people experience mild difficulties and others have more severe challenges. What does dyslexia look like? In class, students with dyslexia may read more slowly and with more effort, make more mistakes when reading aloud, guess words instead of reading them, spell more slowly and make more mistakes. Dyslexia is common, affecting 5 to 10% of people. Although dyslexia is a lifelong condition, people with dyslexia can learn to read and spell with the right teaching.
All right, thank you so much. So next we're going to move into the definition of dyslexia used by the Virginia regulations. If you notice the first line, dyslexia is distinguished from other learning disabilities due to weakness occurring at the phonological level. And I know this is a lot of text on the screen, but this is the full definition in its entirety. Researchers share that most people with dyslexia have been found to have a problem with identifying the separate speech sounds with a word and or learning how letters represent those sounds, which are key factors in reading difficulty. So for instance, your child may not be able to distinguish the two syllables in the word sunset, which are sun and set. Um, some students may have difficulty understanding and executing this task. You don't have to unmute to do it. But in your head, if you say sunset, now say sunset, but take away set and add rise. And what's the new word? Sunrise. Your child may have difficulty isolating or distinguishing the sounds, also known as phonemes, in words like rise, rise, three sounds, or in the word catch, atch, or the word shark, shark. It's important to emphasize that dyslexia is not a result of a student being lazy, unintelligent, or not wanting to learn. The written language is not a natural concept. It takes explicit, direct, systematic, and cumulative instruction to ensure equal access to learning how to read. And that access begins with building the phonological level. So we know that students with dyslexia have difficulties at the phonological level. So our next line, dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurological in origin. I'm not a neurologist and will not attempt to get too technical, but do know many resources like the International Dyslexia Association and the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity, all resources that are linked at the end of this presentation, have parent-friendly articles to support exploring neurobiological origins of dyslexia. All right, in our next three lines, it tells us that dyslexia is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. We mentioned earlier in the slide that dyslexia is a language-based disability. So your child may have delayed speech or difficulty learning to rhyme, difficulty identifying or manipulating the sounds in words. They may have difficulty distinguishing the difference between words and syllables or grasping the correct word when it comes to speaking. And so there are many different characteristics in how dyslexia can present itself. In our final sentence, we're going to discuss secondary consequences. And it has secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. And now that's a lot. So the key takeaways are dyslexia is brain-based, and your child may present with difficulties at phonological tasks, fluency, spelling, or reading. And these difficulties will not match their cognitive abilities. Some children with dyslexia, it may impact them in the areas of vocabulary, comprehension, and fluency as a secondary consequence. All right, that was a lot, but on our next slide, we're going to discuss how prevalent dyslexia is. So many researchers believe that 20% of the population may have dyslexia. It is the most common of neurocognitive difficulties. Dyslexia occurs in all people of all backgrounds and all intellectual levels. People with dyslexia are very bright and they're very capable and many times are gifted in so many areas. Not to limit it, but a few are art, computer science, design, drama, electronics, math, physics, the list goes on. It's also important to note that dyslexia runs in families. Parents with dyslexia may have a child with dyslexia. For some, dyslexia can be identified early in their lives, and for others, it can go unidentified until they're much older. And I've seen that in my own family circle. It is hereditary, and uh, identification it's not at the same rate and speed for everyone. All right, so on our next slide, we are going to talk about some common myths around dyslexia. And we're going to take a moment and play this quick video. Understood.org is a great resource for families. And you can explore many, many, many resources, and they're short articles or short videos. So we're going to play the short video to debunk some myths around dyslexia.
All right. And please let me know if you're unable to hear it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa from Understood. It seems like more people than ever know about dyslexia, but there are still lots of myths and misconceptions about dyslexia out there. In this video, we take on 10 myths about dyslexia and bust them. Myth number 1, only a few people have dyslexia. Fact, dyslexia is a common learning issue. Some experts believe between 5 and 10% of people have dyslexia. Others say as many as 17% show signs of reading issues. The truth is that millions of people have dyslexia. Myth number 2, kids with dyslexia see letters backwards. This is one of the most common misconceptions about dyslexia. The fact is, dyslexia isn't a problem with how kids see letters and words. It's a problem with language. Some kids with dyslexia might write letters backwards, but some don't. So letter reversal isn't necessarily a sign of dyslexia. Myth number 3, dyslexia is a problem of vision. Fact, vision problems don't cause dyslexia. Kids with dyslexia are no more likely to have problems with their eyes or their vision than other kids. It's true that some kids with dyslexia might also have trouble with visual processing. That means the brain has trouble with details and images and processing what the eyes are seeing. Those challenges can make reading difficult, but they're not part of dyslexia. Myth number 4, kids with dyslexia aren't smart. This is an untrue and harmful myth. The fact is, kids with dyslexia are just as smart as their peers. Dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. Many people have struggled with dyslexia and gone on to have successful careers, including some famous people. That includes Daymond John, CEO of FUBU and one of the star entrepreneurs on the TV show Shark Tank. Salma Hayek, the Oscar-nominated actress. Carol Greider, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist. Myth number 5, kids just need to try harder to read. Fact, kids with dyslexia need the right instruction. Research shows that the brain functions differently in kids with dyslexia. It also shows that reading can actually change the brain over time. But effort has nothing to do with it. It's the type of instruction that makes a difference, not how hard kids try. With good instruction and practice, kids with dyslexia can make lasting gains in reading. There are a number of reading programs designed for struggling readers. Many use what's called a multisensory approach. This type of instruction uses sight, sound, and touch as part of learning. Myth number 6, dyslexia doesn't show up until grade school. Fact, signs of dyslexia can show up in preschool or even earlier. That's because dyslexia can affect language skills that are essential for reading. Some signs that a preschooler may be at risk for dyslexia include difficulty rhyming and being a late talker. Myth number 7, dyslexia goes away when kids learn to read. Fact, dyslexia is a lifelong issue. Intervention makes a big difference in helping kids with dyslexia learn to read. But being able to read doesn't mean they're cured. That's because dyslexia can affect more than just basic reading skills. It can make it difficult to read quickly and accurately. It can impact how well kids comprehend what they've read. Kids with dyslexia may also continue to struggle with spelling and writing even when they learn to read. Myth number 8, dyslexia is caused by not reading to kids at home. Fact, dyslexia doesn't happen because of lack of exposure to reading. It's a neurological condition. People who don't know your family may wrongly assume that you're not reading with your child. You may need to explain that dyslexia is caused by differences in how the brain functions. Lack of exposure to reading doesn't cause dyslexia, but reading at home is important for all kids. Myth number 9, kids who don't speak English can't have dyslexia. Fact, dyslexia exists all over the world and in all languages, but it often takes longer to pick up on reading issues in kids who are bilingual. Sometimes teachers and parents think these kids are struggling because they're learning a new language. But if kids have trouble reading in their first language and in their second language, it's a sign that they need to be evaluated. Myth number 10, kids with dyslexia are lazy. This is another completely untrue myth that can be harmful to kids. The fact is, kids with dyslexia are already trying hard. But if kids think that other people are judging them as lazy, it can make them feel less motivated. No child wants to fail. And with the right help, they won't. Well, there you have it. 10 myths about dyslexia busted. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to our channel. And let us know below in the comments what specific myth about dyslexia you think is most harmful and why. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for playing that video. On our next slide, we're going to talk about the brain and dyslexia. And it was briefly touched on a moment ago in the myths. So dyslexia, again, is neurobiological in origin. And we know that there are 4 regions or lobes in the brain, and each lobe has a vital function. And in I wanted to make note of it. I won't go too deeply into it, but I wanted to make note of in the frontal lobe that controls our speech. And we know students or children with dyslexia may have a hard time beginning to stop talk or grasping words or pronouncing words. And so that's control there. And our occipital lobe is where identification of letters is occurring. And our temporal lobe, that's critical for language processing and reading. And so that explicit direct instruction is really working on firing up all the pathways and the neurons in all parts of the brain to explicitly work together. I'm going to go on to the next section. There was a quick 1-minute video in here summarizing it, but I've placed it in at the end for resources. So we're going to go on to the next slide. So dyslexia may present differently in each child. Your child may have difficulty with learning to speak, learning letters and their sounds, organizing written and spoken language, memorizing number facts, reading quickly enough to comprehend, persisting with and comprehending longer reading assignments, spelling, learning a foreign language, or correctly doing math operations. In my home personally, one child has difficulty with spelling and math operations. The other has difficulty with every one of those items I just shared. And on this PowerPoint, you can take some time to peruse all the different characteristics, and it will look different for spelling. Spelling may be difficulty hearing the sounds and words to spell it out versus remembering how the word looks. There could be difficulty with certain memory items, such as learning your times tables, remembering names, remembering how people look, remembering facts and figures. There could be some visual processing difficulties. Finding different text and different fonts may support that. Their directions, that's a big one. A lot of people, there's more research coming out now. People with dyslexia have a difficult time with direction and knowing left to right and navigating, reading analog clocks. And there are a lot of resources out there, and it may look differently for each person. But in our next slide, I'm going to talk about some different ages and stages in which you can look for characteristics. All right, so in this slide here, for my students that are in prior to 3rd grade, so any age prior to 3rd grade, your child may have difficulty learning common nursery rhymes. They may have difficulty remembering names or mispronouncing words, or maybe having that what we call baby talk, or having a hard time distinguishing the difference between cat and kitten, or understanding the at and cat, bat, and rat. And with explicit direct instruction, this could be remedied. But this 1-page sheet has been linked in to peruse, and it shares oral language signs, reading signs, signs in the area of writing, and some social emotional signs as well. And then on our next slide, we're going to discuss the teenage years. I'm sorry, not the teenage years, grades 3 through 8, which again look very differently than prior to 3rd grade. So in upper elementary to middle school, some signs of dyslexia can include slowly acquiring reading skills, trouble with unfamiliar words, avoiding to read out loud, hesitating, using vague language instead of giving specific names, like calling things stuff or thing, confusing words like tornado and volcano. and needing some extra time to process and answer questions. And again, you will have access to this sheet. And on our next one, which I know a lot of people have joined us for, are signs in those teenage years. How does dyslexia look for those of our students who are in high school or beginning their post-secondary careers? And that could represent itself with trouble remembering dates, remembering what the day is, remembering someone's birthday, remembering telephone numbers, remembering names. And now with technology and cell phones, some of this can be mitigated, but this is still an area. Struggling to finish tests on time could be a sign, and having a difficult time learning a foreign language. A lot of it, we're getting more and more research out that's very relevant because we know students many times need to be successful in completing a foreign language, but to go on to many post-secondary options. And so knowing what foreign languages are the best. And there's research out there that American Sign Language is a foreign language that students with dyslexia are better, well, are really great at. Other signs can be poor spelling, messy handwriting, and again, difficulty following directions, organizing and managing time, and some of the social emotional signs, a lack of confidence and low self-esteem. And so those are some of the signs that I briefly went over. And next, we're going to talk about ways to support at home. I know I've given you a lot of information. So let's take a moment and inhale and now exhale. And I know you're probably thinking, this is great information, but how do I support my child with dyslexia now? My answer is, first and foremost, always be their cheerleader. Celebrate every single success. Notice and encourage your child's strength. When it comes to at-home support, there's no wrong way when done with love. You have the best interest of your child at heart, and share that with them honestly and unapologetically. This will be a long journey in which you partner with your child and help them discover what will help them be successful in a K-12 setting and beyond. The skills they're going to learn now will translate to many post-secondary options, such as college or work. And it really starts with letting them know how talented they are, helping them find their passion and what they love, and teaching them how to advocate for themselves. I've met many students in my journey that have gone on and had very successful lives, and it looks different for each person, from being a newscaster, from getting their doctorate and becoming a professor, to being an artist, to being a nurse. Like, the sky is the limit. And self-determination, advocacy, and understanding the resources are key for every student to be successful. And we want to make sure that success translate not only in K-12, but what comes next. And Dr. Morgan's presentation is going to share a lot about what comes next and what you can do for that. But my key takeaways are providing support, encourage, communicate, and discuss strengths. And in our next slide, I wanted to share what some of those strengths look like, because students with dyslexia have many strengths. And I would love to play at least 2 minutes of this video if we can, Anne.
Sure.
Hello everyone, my name's Jo and I'm an ambassador for the British Dyslexia Association. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 strengths of dyslexia that you should know about. Most dyslexic brains are right side dominant, and this means that it works very differently to a left side dominant brain. This can bring so many advantages that you may not know about. Although dyslexics are not known for being the best at memory and numbers and things like that, it can also bring so many advantages that other people don't have. So here are 3 strengths about dyslexia that you should know about. Number 1, creativity. The dyslexic brain, because of its unique way of thinking, is extremely creative. Most dyslexics think very visually, and so we're able to grasp concepts that other people may not. This means we're great at visual processing and things like that, so we're always very good at using our imagination to come up with great new ideas. If you look at some of the famous artists, singers, and actors out there, loads of them are dyslexic. Picasso, Cher, Keira Knightley, you name it, they're all dyslexic. Number 2, thinking outside the box. Thinking outside the box, seeing the bigger picture, and spotting trends are all really good dyslexic strengths. Although we may not be the best with spotting the smaller details, dyslexics are usually really good at seeing the bigger picture and looking at big, exciting concepts. Many great inventors, entrepreneurs are sometimes dyslexic, and that's because they've been able to use their unique way of thinking to help spot gaps in the market, to help develop new and exciting ideas. For example, Richard Branson always says that his dyslexia really helped him to become as big and successful as he is today. The dyslexic brain has helped to develop so many exciting new ideas in this world that has helped shape the planet, and that's pretty exciting if you ask me. Number 3, being hardworking. Now, you may not have thought of this one, but because the education system is shaped in a way that doesn't usually work for dyslexics, this means that most dyslexics have to develop coping strategies or work that little bit harder to keep up with everyone else. Although having to do that extra bit of work to keep up is actually going to give you such a great skill set to become more determined and more strong-willed later on in life. Dyslexia is often seen as such a negative, but it's really not. Once you're able to recognize the strengths within yourself, you'll be able to tackle anything. Being able to use your dyslexic strengths, such as creativity, problem-solving skills, and your determination, you'll be able to tackle some of your weaknesses, and this can make you such a strong person. For example, when revising for an exam, it would be a great
And we're
idea
going to pause that, Ann, right there.
to create colorful, exciting mind.
I wanted to just share that little bit with you. My daughter always says, I can think outside the box, in the cube, in the rectangle, mommy. And so that self-determination is just there. And a lot of companies now, they're looking for people who have neurodiversity to support their companies and their missions and just move to the next level because of all the strengths that people with dyslexia have. So in our next slide, I just wanted to show you the resources. So we've linked in resources from the Virginia Department of Education that is of no cost to families. And then we set out the resources, so some additional information on the background of dyslexia, myths of dyslexia. And on our next slide, we'll go to the next 3 columns, dyslexia and the brain, the science of reading, characteristics of dyslexia, and our final resource page, which shows the strengths of dyslexia, providing support at home, and just some additional things that we thought would be useful to peruse. But we wanted to say, ooh, that's a lot about the overview of dyslexia. Thank you so much. We're going to step to slide 26. I'm going to say just thank you for your time, and we don't have to play this video. And this was just a wrap up, but we created a 1-pager to share with just some facts about dyslexia, what dyslexia is, what it's not, and signs. But again, thank you so much for this quick overview of dyslexia. But we're going to segue into Dr. Morgan's presentation that discusses the transitions, special education and planning for life after high school. And don't forget the form that we place in for any questions you may have.
Thank you, April. So the form, I know several of you were coming in a little bit later. So I went ahead and added the form again in the chat box. So if you click on that form, in the event that we may go over time, because we still have Dr. Morgan's section and then I have my section for presentation. So that form in the chat, that is a Q&A. If you have any questions for us, we are more than happy to look through your questions and then we will respond to you within 24 hours. All right. So we are going to segue into Dr. Morgan's presentation. Can you just give me a thumbs up, April? Are you able to hear all the videos that were?
Yes, it was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, so this is Dr. Morgan's presentation. Again, her section is on transitioning from high school, after high school, like what is that going to look like and how you can prepare your child to be ready for that. So I am going to go ahead and play.
Hello, my name is Trisha Morgan, and I'm from George Mason University Training and Technical Assistance Center. And I'm excited to be speaking to you about transition in special education, supporting the planning of your child for life after high school. The goal of our session is to introduce families and caregivers and professionals to transition in special education, as well as provide tools to support independence for youth with disabilities after high school. Our objectives include touching on self-awareness and post-secondary planning, the importance of beginning early, the role of families, disability awareness, and overcoming barriers to post-secondary success. Parent concerns, we're always concerned about our child, but life after high school brings some additional concerns to the table. For example, how will I know what's going on? Will they be isolated? Handle their money? Can they hold a job? Will they take care of their health? And can they live on their own? And my favorite is, who is going to wake them up? As opposed to discussing the concerns on the previous slide, we want to put all of those anxious feelings and questions aside and address several factors for future planning. Some things we want to consider is, will your child further their education, or are they more employment bound? Transportation, can they drive? How are they going to get back and forth to work? Perhaps you might want to consider public transportation. Daily living skills that we need as adults are things such as this hygiene, medication management, any specific dietary issues, money management. They're going to be faced with different social situations that they may not be comfortable with, and it's an opportunity to consider development of those skills as well. When making plans for the future, one may ask, is the employment of people with disabilities a critical issue? Statistics indicates that it is. Individuals with disabilities are 2.5 times more likely to be unemployed or underemployed than people without disabilities. However, Larry Quartering states, every youth has some skill that, if nurtured, will provide them the opportunity to make money for the rest of their life. So therefore, employment is possible for all people. And as families, we must set high expectations for youth with disabilities. They can work. We know that they can become lifelong learners, and we must believe that they can live independently. Work is important for all of us, and it's also very important for individuals with disabilities because it provides that sense of self-sufficiencies and independence, and it also keeps us connected to our community. It provides meaning to our days. We learn social skills and responsibilities and overcome the feeling of isolation. And it also gives them a role in the adult world. And I'm sure you can think of several other benefits that work can provide. Think about your own employment experiences for a moment. In what ways did employment have a positive impact on your life? And what do you hope your child will gain from being employed? Some barriers that youth often encounter are they're unable to find or keep jobs. The jobs don't meet their strengths or their interests, or they're staying at home waiting for services to find them a job, or they're not willing to disclose their disability. How can you support your child with overcoming these barriers or being able to manage struggles as they arise? Topics we will touch on include the importance of developing self-awareness and self-determination, steps you can take to support career planning process, determining if disclosure of a disability or asking for job accommodations is necessary, and how to have those conversations about their disability. And finally, we'll add a few additional helpful tips at the end, and fuse throughout the presentation are resources to support the topic. And then there are a number of resources at the end that I'm hoping you will find very helpful. So it all begins with that sense of self-awareness. A disability does not define who a person is. It does, however, impact their ability to learn and work and interact with others. Many youth don't know what their disability is or even deny having a disability, and it impacts and affects their school and on the job. Some points, did you know that 1 year after graduating from high school, children with disabilities who have self-determination skills are more likely to be employed or attending post-secondary education than students without self-determination skills? Did you know that 3 years after graduation from high school, children with disabilities who have self-determination skills are more likely to have a job that provides benefits, vacation time, and also more likely to live somewhere other than the family home? Skills associated with self-determination, I had mentioned these skills, and what we're talking about are choice-making, decision-making, problem-solving, setting goals, self-management, self-advocacy, and self-awareness. So these are the skills we want our youth to be able to develop. What the benefits are of the development of these skills is students who incorporated self-determination goals into their IEPs and transition plans were more likely to earn higher incomes after graduation. The incorporation of choice-making opportunities into behavior support plans improves behavior outcomes, and instruction and problem-solving skills leads to improved employment outcomes. What can families do to encourage self-determined behavior in their child? We want to encourage your child to make choices about their everyday activities and to set priorities. Have them identify their strengths, their preferences, their interests, and their needs. Educate yourself about your child's rights and talk to your child about the process of goal setting and how to overcome the barriers that are in their way in meeting those goals. Guide them towards understanding the concept of accommodations and how these can help or hinder their education and career goals. Last one, talking to your child about their disability. It sometimes can be difficult, but this discussion will provide the support your youth needs with developing those skills to self-advocate for their own needs post-high school. Let's reflect for a moment again. Have you ever openly discussed your child's disability with them? How did you do it? Was it a comfortable conversation? I encourage you to have this conversation with your child. Part of being self-determined is also having self-awareness. How do you assist your child with developing self-awareness of disability and the understanding of those needs? Have your child practice discussing the disability with others. How do I talk to my child about their disability? So we're focusing on the child, not the disability. We recognize their unique characteristics and realize that they're more like their peers than different. We're using first-person language that your child will understand. And then as families, we want to be aware of their strengths and their talents and their gifts, as well as their learning differences. Career planning. It's important that families are involved in the career planning process. Before youth begin looking for a job, they need to be able to answer these questions. What is their dream job? And what do they need to know about that job in particular? Classes in school. What classes while they're attending school can help them learn the needed skills for that job? Will they need post-secondary education? Do they have the skills currently for the job? And then after those have been identified, make that action plan. Why should families be involved in this career planning process? You learn how your child views employment. You also help them avoid those poor job matches. It improves their transition plans and their employment plans. Youth begin thinking about work in a productive way. And it also helps youth see a realistic step-by-step plan to reach their long-term goals. Positive family involvement with youth leads to employment and academic success. Family involvement is a major predictor of post-secondary success. Family involvement. So share your knowledge of your child's strengths and interests with school staff. And I had mentioned maintaining high expectations. So if families do not have high expectations for their child, then no one else will either. A quick look at maintaining high expectations for your child. High expectations lead to positive transition outcomes or results. And this document here is going to provide you additional information and the importance of setting those high expectations for your child. Transition to employment. What can parents do now? This provides you with a 4-step process on how to support your child as they begin to transition into the world after high school. The first step is thinking about employment, exploring their interests, their skills, and their dreams. Discover how interests and dreams then relate to employment possibilities. Having a job or work experience during high school is another important step. And also explore those employment options and take note of your child's soft skills, the resource that's available to you. Whether at work or in the post-secondary education setting, young adults may find it necessary to disclose their disability in order to receive accommodations that will help them be successful. It is definitely beneficial to disclose as soon as the need for accommodations is realized. And it may be beneficial to suggest specific accommodations. As families, we should strive to understand what they are and what they are not, and help our youth secure accommodations if needed. Some resources for families in reference to obtaining accommodations. So this college accommodations fast facts, it explains the key differences between high school and college settings. Let's jump to the IEP. There's several listed here, but let's jump to the IEP. In high school, students have access to general education and special education through their IEP. In college, IEPs are not used. Classes include students with and without disabilities. The curriculum is not modified. So let's read through one more. Receiving accommodations. In high school, the IEP process identifies student accommodations. In college, students must initiate the process and register with the Disability Support Services office on campus. So here are a few key differences between high school and college when referring to accommodations. Another few tips about accessing accommodations after high school, how to help your child. Defining what an accommodation is, making sure that they know what it is and the importance of it, and also teaching them how and when to disclose information about their disability. These resources, of course, will be accessible to you through the PowerPoint presentation. So as far as disability disclosure, disclosing one's disability can be something difficult to navigate. When discussing disclosure with your youth, encourage them to be able to answer these questions. Can they describe themselves to someone else? And what will they gain by disclosing? Do they have to disclose? And to whom and when should they consider disclosing? It may be necessary for youth to disclose a disability. It really is only necessary if accommodation is needed. Disclosure is a personal choice. And one thing to keep in mind is youth should practice answering interview questions, including questions that are illegal to ask. Help your youth learn how to discuss disclosure so their strengths and skills are still the focal point and not the disability. Tip, practice answering interview questions with your child. Some additional helpful tips that we had brought up in the beginning that I want to be a little bit more specific with. Plan for transportation. Consider if the job is within walking distance. Is it accessible via public transportation? Work with service providers to identify transportation options and transportation needs post high school. Make sure that there's a plan in place for after they graduate. And we do recognize there is a bigger issue in our rural areas. Some additional helpful tips to consider is that aspect of disability management. Recognize the importance of daily disability management, things such as medications. Do medications cause sleepiness at certain times of the day? Do they perhaps require a separate restroom for personal care? Has the employer been notified of important medical issues? Has the employer been instructed on how to deal with an emergency? So these are just a few tips on disability management. And always encourage post-secondary education. Formal education ends after high school for many youth with disabilities. However, many new jobs today require some type of post-secondary education. Keeping in mind, youth with disabilities enter and complete post-secondary education at a much lower rate than youth without disabilities. Encourage post-secondary education. Entitlement versus eligibility. The services your child receives in school will end when they leave high school. Services and supports in the community require an eligibility determination, and there are lengthy waiting lists for many services, so plan early. Remember, there are no IEPs after high school. So moving forward, these are our goals. We want our youth to accept and understand their disability, to set realistic goals, to be able to self-advocate and use resources. that they have an understanding of acceptable social skills, and they know their rights and responsibilities. So let's get into some additional resources that can be helpful. The next few slides are a list of actions students can take to be successful in college. I'm not going to read through them. I'll let you tackle those on your own. But I want to get into some additional links to resources. These are specific resources for youth. Let's go into high school versus college. So this gives the child a view of the differences between high school and college, legal differences, documentation needed, and self-advocacy. I like the one right here, student identified by the school, supported by parents and teachers. Self-advocacy from college perspective is student must self-identify to the Office of Disability Services. Accommodations, the school is responsible. However, in college, the student is responsible to advocate for those accommodations. Disability support services in college. 7 facts for your youth to read through. Registering for accommodations, disability documentation, procedures to request, meeting with disability support services. So these are some important tips to consider. Talking to college professors. A little bit of information and how to approach your professor. What should you say? What types of accommodations are you asking for? Go to your professor during their office hours and engage in this conversation. This also gives your child a outline of a conversation, gets them prepared for talking to the professor and asking those difficult questions, as well as additional possible scenarios to manage if they perhaps may encounter. Let's see, getting accommodations at college. This is geared towards the youth. What do I need in the classroom? Some accommodations to consider. What do I need during exams? What do I need completing assignments? And then in general, what kinds of accommodations do I need? And some questions that may come up, and of course, confidentiality. Post-secondary resources for families. This is similar to the previous slide, except it's more geared towards
Alexa, what time is it?
It's 3:55 p.m.
helping students with disabilities successfully transition to college, differences between disability supports in K through 12 versus higher ed. So it goes through some of those similar questions on the previous slide for youth. I do want to jump to this next slide because I want to review this K through 12 transition planning for families. Traditionally, transition planning by the age of 16, a student must have their transition plan in place. However, we are encouraging early onset of transition planning as early as kindergarten, because the earlier we begin, the better off our students are. So this is geared towards families. It's a K through 12 transition planning for parents. Here are some suggestions of what to do to support your child in elementary school, in middle school, and in high school. Looking in the elementary school problem column, apply for the Medicaid waivers. I had mentioned eligibility as opposed to entitlement. The Medicaid waivers you have to be eligible for, so it is important. And there is a lengthy waiting list, so it is very important to apply for that as soon as possible. Here we have developed self-care and daily living routines. Help your child learn about adult employment through reading. Let your child make choices and decisions. Several listed there. When we jump over to the middle school column, it gets a little bit more intense. Again, we have applied for the waivers. Begin meeting with your district transition coordinator. Include work skills in your child's IEP. Encourage friendships and team activities. Begin helping your child understand their disability and the related characteristics. Teach them about money management. And then, of course, we jump over to high school, and we get into more specifics of career interests and planning, connecting with the Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services, practice independent living skills, budgeting, shopping, cooking, medication management. Of course, these could also be practiced as early on as elementary school, I believe. K through 12 transition timeline for youth. Same concept, except this is more, it's geared towards youth, but it's also beneficial for families to see this as well. So on the far left side, these are the areas we want to focus on, the domains of successful transition: self-determination, post-secondary education and training, employment, and independent living. And as you can see, there are also columns based on grade level. These are the types of things that should be ongoing in this column here. We target elementary school. Again, we then target middle school, and then we break it up into high school grade level, freshman year, sophomore, junior, senior. And as you can see, the progression from freshman year to senior year, the skills develop over time, the intensity develops over time based on the child's grade level and where they are in their career planning and independent living planning. These last two links here are actual websites. PETC, the Parent Educational Advocacy and Training Center, collaborates with families and focuses on youth with disabilities. And then the ARC promotes and protects the human rights of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I didn't touch on those resources because I wanted to give you the opportunity to be able to access those at another time. On this particular page is a link to a feedback survey. So if you are able to click on the QR code, if you wouldn't mind completing that for me, I'd greatly appreciate it. Here's my contact information. My colleague, April Lennox, talked with you earlier about dyslexia, and here's my contact information as well. Should you have any additional questions about transition. I thank you for your time. It was wonderful speaking with you all, and I hope to be able to speak with you again in the future. Have a wonderful evening.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Morgan, for that very insightful information. I hope many of you received the information that you're looking for, especially when you're thinking about your child transitioning from elementary to middle school to high school, and of course, post-secondary as well. So we are going to just dive right in. It's already 4 o'clock. Sorry, I'm trying to be cognizant of everyone's time. We are going to get into this section, which is the process of supporting all students in literacy. If you came in a little bit later, I just want to reintroduce myself. Again, I'm Ann Belletto. I'm our division's Pre-K-12 Literacy Coordinator and Dyslexia Advisor. And for my section of this presentation, I'm going to explain the process of how we support all students with reading and what school buildings do when teachers or parents suspect that a student is struggling in reading. So when I say struggling in reading, it could be generally speaking, any issues or concerns with reading, or if you know that your child has symptoms of dyslexia. So it all begins with our universal screener, right? So screeners help identify students at risk or who are not meeting goals, and it determines what students already know and where to start instruction. So in our division at Falls Church, we are required to have students take a state or a division-wide literacy screener 3 times a year. So they take the first screener in the fall, which is around August or September. And then they get another mid-year assessment in the winter around December or January. And then they take the spring assessment around April or May. Our universal screener for our division is called a standardized assessment for reading, or commonly referred to as STAR reading, which I think many of you or most of you are actually familiar with. Students take the STAR reading. They also take the STAR math. So the STAR assessment has about 34 item skills-based questions, which are aligned to the Virginia Standards of Learning. The first 10 items are usually comprehension questions, and the remaining 24 test items are skill-based that include grade-appropriate domains. So domains would either be phonics, it would include print concepts, phonological awareness, vocabulary, literary text, and nonfiction text. The primary grades, of course, would include phonics, it'll include phonological awareness and print concepts in kindergarten. And in the upper grades, it would include vocabulary, literary text, and nonfiction text. So again, depending on the grade level, some items may contain a single sentence while others may contain short passages. The STAR assessment is designed to be adaptive. So what that means is depending on how your child answers a specific item, the test will then adjust based on the student's response. So for example, if they answered correctly in a question, it'll bump up the level of difficulty on the next question item. However, if they had an incorrect answer, then the next item would make it lower to a lower difficulty level for the next item and so forth, which is why it's adaptive. Okay. Although the STAR provides several reports to identify a student who may be struggling in reading, we use the percentile scores. We follow the district's benchmark score, which is a default of the 40th percentile. We use a percentile score to compare how the student is performing in comparison to his or her peers, or equal to or better than 40% of their peers. So the percentile score also indicates which students are at or above benchmark. Students who are on watch, we usually call them the bubble kids because they're almost there, just probably need a little bit more review, or students who need intervention and urgent intervention. So for STAR, any students who score below the 40th percentile are identified as needing intervention or urgent intervention. Students who fall within that category are usually assessed further to identify at least 1 to 3 specific skills that may need further assessment. Okay, so the percentile score is equivalent to the student scaled score, which I think many of you are also familiar with if you receive the STAR reports after an assessment. The scaled score is used for comparing the child's performance over time and across grade levels, which is why we prefer using the percentile score, because then it gives it that immediate performance level of where the child is currently at. The second screener that we use is the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screener, which is also known as the PALS assessment. So if your child is going to JTP or Mount Daniel, you're probably familiar with this assessment. This is a state literacy screener to help teachers identify students who may be struggling with reading. The PALS assessment is designed to identify students that may need that intervention. They also inform teachers the specific type of instruction by providing them with explicit information about their students' knowledge and the basic foundational skills of reading, which usually includes common predictors of reading difficulty, such as weaknesses in phonemic awareness and also alphabet knowledge. However, I'm not really going to go into too much detail about the PALS, since the screener is going to be changing to the Virginia Language and Literacy Screener beginning in the fall of 2024 for kinder through third grade. The new screener is going to align to the Virginia Standards of Learning, but most importantly, it's going to be aligned to the science of reading, which includes both foundational skills in reading, and it also includes the language comprehension piece. That is what is currently missing with our PALS assessment. It is heavily focused on the phonological piece of it. It has a little bit of the comprehension of fluency, but it doesn't really give us details with the language comprehension component. The new reports, however, that is going to be more detailed and targeted to specific skills that will provide teachers with that guidance and support for recommendation, and also include appropriate instruction that's explicit and systematic, which is what our students who struggle with reading or students with dyslexia really need. Okay, so the VALS, again, is going to launch next school year for kinder through third grade. Right now, the Virginia Literacy Partnership Office is currently working on a pilot literacy screener for 4th through 8th grade, which is going to launch in school year 2025-2026. All right, so once the literacy screeners give teachers an overview of students' performance level, we do have our teachers and specialists who go through data dialogues and their collaborative planning meetings, where they dig a little bit deeper into what the score actually means. So when they dig a little deeper, they try to identify the areas of strengths, areas that may require additional instructional support. They can also do this by giving additional assessments, which we call the diagnostic assessments. The diagnostic assessment actually provides teachers with more specific details of where the student is struggling with in reading. So for example, the STAR assessment may show that a student is scoring low in the word knowledge and skills section of the test. The teacher or the reading specialist can give a phonics diagnostic assessment that will be able to tell the teacher if the child is struggling, for example, with a specific spelling feature like vowel teams or maybe CVC words. So it really gives the exact specific skills for that. If a student is scoring low in many areas of comprehension, for example, then a diagnostic assessment like MAZE, which the middle school is using, will inform the teacher if background knowledge, morphology, which is the meaning of words, or syntax, which is the structure of sentences, are affecting his or her comprehension. Or they can use the Read Naturally program, which will assess students with fluency. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're thinking about science-based reading research, usually when a child is struggling with comprehension, it is usually an issue with a foundational skill, for example, like decoding words. So many times when teachers look through the data and say, well, they're struggling with summarizing or summary, one of the questions that in our meetings that reading specialists will ask the teacher is, well, did you look at their spelling features or decoding skills or fluency, because that could be affecting their comprehension. MTSS, this is a program that we have in our division. All school buildings have it. It is called the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support. If you're familiar with it, you'll probably hear its acronym, which is MTSS. This provides instructional support for all students. So it's not just students that are needing intervention. This is for all students in our division. It includes a 3-tiered system for academics. There's also a behavioral intervention piece, but I'm focusing more on the academic piece. So tier 1, if you look at the bottom of the triangle, that is the core curriculum or grade level instruction that's aligned to the standards of learning. So in other words, that means that all students are expected to receive tier 1 core curriculum instruction in the general education classroom. Then in the center of the triangle, you have tier 2 instruction, and those are for students who, like I mentioned earlier, are in the bubble. So they're usually between the 20th to 39th percentile of the STAR assessment. This tiered instruction can be taught in the general education classroom, or it could be in a pull-out program in a small group setting. So I know in the middle school and the high school, it's typically a pull-out program where you have the reading specialists or interventionists or assigned teachers giving that instruction. In the elementary level, which I'll go over in a little bit, they have the classroom teachers who work in small groups, and then you also have the reading interventionists who also assist with tier 2 instruction. At the very top tier, it's the smallest of the triangle because that's usually a smaller percentage of students that need that urgent intervention. That requires more intensive instruction, and that is in all school buildings, that is a pull-out program. So they leave their general education classroom, they spend a few minutes, probably like 30, 40 minutes with a literacy expert in their school building who is typically the reading specialist or the reading interventionist. Many students who go through Tier 3 instruction are usually receiving foundational skill review or foundational skill practices. So it's very intense and very explicit in their instruction. Okay, so it's really through the MTSS model that any students who may show signs of dyslexia or who may be struggling with reading in general are usually given this type of support to help them feel successful. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of what that would look like. So like other support programs, school-based MTSS follows a process when students are identified as needing that additional support. So although every school building has MTSS, they customize the procedures to fit their school needs. But generally, all school buildings go through a similar process that you see here in the presentation slide. Again, it begins with literacy screeners, which is a STAR. And for the primary grades, we are using PALS, which you now know is going to change to the VALS assessment for next year. So beginning the first meeting, you have your general education classrooms that collect data. It could be classroom observations. Maybe they gave the child some diagnostic assessments to look into the data a little bit more. Some teachers look at the SOL scores from the previous years, or even WIDA scores for multilingual learners. They then collect all that data. They submit the student's name for a Kid Talk meeting with the MTSS team. The MTSS team usually consists of the MTSS leader, who is usually the facilitator for the meeting in the school building. It includes teachers. It has a specialist, whether it's a reading specialist, if it's a math concern, it's a math specialist there. There's always an administrator that's in the meeting. We do have our counselors and any other adults who are directly involved with the child's learning. So team members can vary depending on the school building and of course the area of concern. The members then partake in a dialogue about the student's performance level using evidence from various data points. So we're not just looking at STAR screener. We're looking at several data points here. And then they try to identify the area of concern. Together, they brainstorm appropriate strategies and interventions that are based on science-based reading research. And they also discuss the frequency of support that the child is going to need. Now, after the team creates an instructional plan for the student, the teacher and staff members who directly teaches the student will then use those instructional strategies and interventions as agreed upon in the meeting. And then from there, they are going to continue collecting data for another 4 to 6 weeks. So by then, when they reconvene, they should have about 4 to 6 data points to look at. And then they discuss the student's progress. They determine whether or not the interventions worked. And if it did not work, what other interventions can we do for the child so that we can continue making the child feel successful, especially with reading. So again, they plan for next steps. The one thing I'd like to make note of is that MTSS is not a referral for a special education evaluation. Although there is a possibility that it could lead to it, only if interventions and several data points show that the interventions aren't working for the child. Or in the event that you went ahead and had your child go through formal diagnosis that identified your child as having dyslexia, then then we can go through the whole referral process. But I just want to make sure that that's clear, that there's no confusion with MTSS and a referral for an evaluation. Okay. So this is the popular reading rope. If you're familiar with science or reading, or you've been following along with the changes in literacy, you are probably familiar with Scarborough's reading rope. And if not, well, this can be your first time, and I'm sure you're going to see more of it, especially when we do more parent coffee in the school buildings, especially with the new Virginia Literacy Act that April had mentioned earlier. So when I say team, I'm referring to the MTSS team, when they collaborate to provide students with best and most appropriate instructional strategies for intervention, it should be aligned to science-based reading research, which is also known as the science of reading. So it begins teaching or reviewing with the most simple skills first before teaching to the more complex skills. So one of the best visual example of this is what you see here, which is a theoretical model for reading, which is Scarborough's reading rope. And Scarborough's rope clearly shows the two strands that all children need to master and learn in order for them to develop and strengthen their reading skills so that they can become skilled readers. And to become a skilled reader, that would mean they have fluency, and with fluency, they're able to comprehend what they're reading. In the primary grades, there is a heavy emphasis on word recognition, but it should still include teaching language comprehension. So that's also one of the misconceptions that many people have about science of reading. If they're not familiar with it, some people think that science of reading is only focused on phonics, and it's not. It should include both word recognition and language comprehension. In the upper grades, of course, we would assume that students are already strong in their foundational skills, which would make language comprehension more of a focus from third grade on up. Okay. However, students with dyslexia or those struggling with reading may need more explicit instruction in the word recognition strand. And again, in the reading research or science of reading, it says that both word recognition and language comprehension need to be strategically taught and increasingly mastered until the child is able to read fluency and with comprehension, which is why you see here in the reading rope how the ropes are starting to intertwine. And at the end, once students are strong in both areas, then they become skilled readers. So here are some of the instructional resources and programs when you're thinking about the supports that each school building provides for all students. Could either be supplemental or interventional programs, and some of them are also digital programs as well that we have in our division. So our teachers and our specialists, they're experts in their field. So they know which resources are appropriate and beneficial for their students' learning. So for students who struggle with reading or show signs of dyslexia, a structured literacy instruction, such as Orton-Gillingham, for example, or small group settings are effective. And due to the new state law, the Virginia Literacy Act, which is more commonly known as VLA, the state is going to provide additional professional development for all staff on how to teach reading. So they're going to train teachers what evidence-based literacy instruction looks like, what is science-based reading research, and how we are using that in the classrooms to support all students. Right now, we have one teacher who is going through the process of becoming a certified trainer for Orton-Gillingham. And in return, to build sustainability, she is going to provide professional development for all staff who may be interested in receiving the Orton-Gillingham approach. Okay, so if you take a look over at Mount Daniel and Oak Street, they do have small group instructional settings that are focused on targeted skills. Every week, teachers meet for collaborative planning meetings with the reading specialist and the PYP coordinator. And in those meetings, they look at data, they plan together, and they also discuss, well, what are some of the strategies that we can use? And they also have what they call Mount Daniel Danny time, and at Oak Street it's called Tiger Paws, and that's usually for a time in the day where they have interventions for students who may need that tier 2 instruction. Many of our teachers are trained with Orton-Gillingham. The last 2 years since we've heard about the Virginia Literacy Act, we started getting teachers into the Orton-Gillingham training. So many of our teachers are trained. We do have a few more that will need that training, but again, that is where one of our teachers is currently going through the process so she can provide that training for all. Our reading specialists and our interventionists in both school buildings, they do pull-out programs where they provide that urgent intensive instruction. And then some of the programs that we use with the all-in VA or all-in tutoring, we have Lexia Core 5. I think many of you are familiar with Imagine Learning. We also have the Renaissance Mayan as digital programs as well. And then I added here, which I'll explain later, is the Amplify Core Knowledge Language Arts Core Curriculum, also known as Amplify CKLA. So that has just been approved by the board members last Tuesday, I believe. So that is now going to be our kinder through 5th grade core curriculum program that we are going to use. And the great thing is that it also has the M-Class CKLA, which is catered to students who may need that tier 3 intervention. Over at the middle school, they do have what they call flex time. That includes teachers, specific teachers are assigned, so they provide that tier 2 instructional support. The reading specialist also has a pull-out program. She usually works with kids in a small group setting. A lot of it is focused on foundational reading skills. Again, not to say that she doesn't focus on language comprehension, but looking at the data points and where students are at and the skills and practices that they need. She goes through that whole process of making sure that the instruction is explicit and systematic. And then they also have these other programs in place. Lexia Para, they use Newsela, they have Language Live, they have the iExcel ALA, which was a new program that they just added on this year. And then again, we have the Renaissance Mayan. Now we're at the Meridian High School. Again, we have our reading specialists and interventionists who pull students out for tier 2 and tier 3 instruction. We do have the reading strategies class, which focus on those foundational skills. And then during Mustang block, that's more like an optional for students that may need that additional instruction. And again, some of the digital programs that we have, they do have Lexia Para, and Mayan digital programs as well. So there's a lot. They do get a lot of resources and support from all the teachers in every school building, especially with our reading specialists who are the literacy experts in the school building. So the one thing I want to make sure I share with all of you is the Virginia Literacy Act, or the VLA. And I know April gave you some information about VLA. So now I want to focus it on what that is going to look like for us at Falls Church. So again, if you've been following the changes that are happening with literacy in the Commonwealth of Virginia, about a year ago, Governor Youngkin signed into law the VLA that goes into effect beginning of next school year. The reason why I want to make sure I mention this is because it has a significant impact on how we teach reading to our students. And again, it also requires that our kinder through 5th grade core curriculum, which is now Amplify CKLA because it's already been approved, is aligned to science-based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction. So to give you a little context, a historical context to all this, back in school year 2022-2023, the state completed a very comprehensive review of all the proposed ALA programs by going through a rigorous and intense instructional review using a rubric with the Virginia Department of Education and with the Virginia Literacy Partnership Office, which is a department in I think under the University of Virginia. And it included literacy experts, administrators, reading specialists, teachers, university literacy professors, and even division literacy leaders from around the Commonwealth. So after reviewing many proposed ELA programs, because I heard many programs were submitting their proposals to VDOE, the final listing from the state was made public just last year in December of 2023. So as a division, we went through a program adoption process that was thorough and inclusive of all grade level and special population representatives. So from 5 highly recommended ELA programs we reviewed from the state, our kinder through 5th grade teachers and evaluation committee for the program adoption had an overall consensus to use Amplify Core Knowledge, which is Amplify CKLA, which they are going to start using for next year. Okay, so the great thing about that is now from kinder through 5th grade, we are going to have more consistency. When students transition from one grade level to the next, they're hearing the same language, skills are scaffolded, and teachers now have the same routines and structures in place. And Amplify CKLA also provides those intervention pieces for differentiated learning. So if you have students that need to be challenged, they have information for that. Students who need Tier 2 instruction, Amplify CKLA also has that information. And then we are going to use the M-Class Amplify for our Tier 3 instruction. So lots of things happening with literacy around the state, but great things. So as a division, I also want you to know that many of our dedicated literacy teacher leaders are going to be working this summer. They're going to be doing summer curriculum writing in all grade levels from kinder through 12th grade. Because our ELA standards are also changing in addition to the Virginia Literacy Act. So the instructional implementation of the new ELA standards beginning next school year, and those of us who are working on curriculum documents, we are going to work together to align our core curriculum, which will also include what this is going to look like for our interventions, and then also thinking about our IB units, right? Because we are an IB division. So we also need to make sure all of that is integrated to meet the needs of all our students in Falls Church. Right, and here are some of the homeschool connections. So for one, it's always important to communicate with your child's teacher and ask for ways that you can support them from home. You can always talk to them and say, hey, what are the resources you're using? What are some of the instructional strategies that I can do from home and connect it to content? You can also share any information that may be useful for your child's teacher to know. May you know your child well. What are the strengths? What are their weaknesses? What are things that you're noticing that works from home? And share that with your teacher or with your child's teacher. Also understand what are some of the available modifications or accommodations, if any, for your child. So again, talking to the teacher, reading specialist, or any of the specialists in the school buildings. When they're learning new content or new vocabulary, it's also important to ask, well, what are some of the words that they're learning so that from home, you can also practice that with your child. So for the primary grades, you can definitely do some games and make it fun for them at home. And for the older kids, you can use audiobooks or text to speech. So you're going to receive this presentation slide. So what I did is I went ahead and linked some of these programs that have those audiobooks for your child to read at home. And then also read aloud with your child using high interest books. So when you think about who you should contact first, again, it's always your child's teacher because they're with your child every single day from Monday through Friday for many hours. So talking to your child's teacher and just finding out what they're doing in the classroom to support your child, but also sharing what you know about your child. What are the strengths? What are areas that you're concerned with? Having that conversation. You may also want to talk to the school-based reading specialists. They're very knowledgeable. Again, they are the literacy experts. Right now, they're going through a 9-module training around the science-based reading research and evidence-based literacy instruction and what small group settings would look like with all the changes that are happening. But when you're also thinking about data and you want to know more, your reading specialists in the school buildings would have that information. You may want to talk to your child's primary doctor, especially if you're thinking about having your child go through a formal diagnosis or or going through a dyslexic assessment. They won't be able to test your child for dyslexia. However, they may refer you to a specialist or to a clinic within the area. You may also want to talk to your school-based special education teacher coordinator, especially if you know your child has gone through the entire MTSS process and none of those interventions are working and the data is still showing. And again, we're not just looking at one data, we're looking at various data. If those various data points are still showing that your child is not succeeding with reading and still struggling, then you may want to talk to your special education teacher coordinator and maybe ask about what are my next steps for referral. You can also talk to a school psychologist as well. And these are just some of the resources that I've linked in. So we do have our literacy webpage, which is, it's constantly changing. I'm always changing things because as things get old, I remove it. And as new things, especially with the Virginia Literacy Act, come into place, I'm starting to add more things, and especially with the new ELA standards. We also have in the Virginia Department of Education, there is a dyslexia website. If you're not familiar with it, it has a lot of great resources. The Virginia Literacy Partnership, I think this is a really great resource. So let me see if I can click on that. So if you go to the VLP, it provides you with all the information about Virginia Literacy Act. You've been hearing me talk about VLA. You've heard April mention VLA. And if you're still not too familiar with that, what that is, this is your go-to webpage. The Virginia Literacy Partnership has everything. This is also the department that's creating the new literacy screener for next year. So feel free to go through it. It has a lot of great resources that you can find here. It has short videos. It also has webinars that are available, and they're constantly uploading new resources and information on this page. And then the Virginia Family, if you're interested in connecting with other families who have children with dyslexia, this is also another great resource. If you're interested in tutoring services, then you have this link here. And then these two resources here, this link will take you to a web page if you're interested in having that formal assessment for dyslexia for your child. All right. April, how are we with time?
We're at 4:33.
Okay. All right. So that was actually the end of my presentation. We do have, again, the Q&A form. If you came in late, you can go ahead and click. If you click on that form, because I know we are way over time. Again, your name, we would love to have your email address so that it'll help us respond to some of your questions. If the question pertains mostly to April, to me with Falls Church and the process that we go through, or maybe as you think about the transition phases, then we will send those questions to Dr. Morgan, but we are more than happy to answer those questions and respond to you within 24 hours. And if we don't know the answer to your question, we will definitely make sure we find those answers for you. So you can type in your question here. And then if there's any feedback you'd like to give us as far as the information you received today, that could also lead into maybe presentation number 2, if anything. April, is there anything you wanted to add on?
I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. And I know personally and I know professionally what you all are going through, and just know it will be okay. It will. When we just start thinking about strengths and planning ahead and just self-determination, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And TTAC is here to continue supporting your division. And again, the Q&A form is a great starting point for any additional questions. But you see our contact information, and we just really appreciate your time on this very wonderful Monday afternoon. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, April. And we do, on behalf of Falls Church and of course, George Mason, we thank you for joining our session. I know we went a little bit over time, but we hope that the information we shared with you is informative and useful. And again, please reach out if you have further questions, and that please make use of that Q&A. Even if other questions come up from now and whenever, you have my email address. And if there's questions that I can't answer for you, I will definitely reach out to our TTAC team. And then also Rebecca Sharp, who is our Executive Director for Special Education.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.